that we're live as soon as we are. I'm going to give just another moment just so that people can find it. And it looks like everything is good. Okay, I'm going to say that we are all good and people are watching, so I'm going to start. So hello, welcome to Escondido Public Library Virtual Author Chat Series. This episode is in partnership with Mysterious Galaxy Bookstore. I'm your host, Jessica Buck, and today I am joined by authors Rosalyn, Briar, Katherine, Forrister, and Lizelle Sambri. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am so excited to chat with you all.
Thanks for having us.
Yes,
you.
Yes, from near and far, you have come together today. I want to let everyone know that you can order books by the authors from Mysterious Galaxy Bookstore or from your local bookseller as well. And the links to Mysterious Galaxy are in the chat description. If you have any questions for the authors, please feel free to add those to the comments and I will get to those as they pop up. So first, let's just start with a little introduction. Tell us about you. And I guess I will just choose who goes first, and then from then on it can be completely natural. So Rosalyn, do you want to tell us a little bit about you first?
sure. Right. Hi, everyone. I'm Rosalyn Briar, and I'm really excited to be here tonight with you all. I am an author, a dark fantasy author, and I've been writing for about 4 years. My husband and I, we have two feisty little girls, so you might hear them running around while we're on this meeting, but hopefully they'll be quiet. But yeah, so but yeah, I've been writing for about 4-ish years now, and my latest book was A Sea of Pearls and Leaves, and it's a fairy tale retelling.
Thank you. I'm so happy that you're here. And I guess, Liselle, would you like to go next?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Lizelle Sambri. I'm a Trinidadian Canadian author. I grew up in Toronto. I now live in Northern Ontario with my partner and our little beagle. I call her a puppy, but she's 4, but she's still a puppy. Yeah, and I've written on and off pretty much since I was 13, and I've been professionally writing, I suppose you can say, for the last couple of years. And Blood Like Magic is my first published novel.
Hey, thank you so much. And Katherine.
Hi, my name is Katherine Forrister, and I also have been writing dark fantasy. And I am from Kansas City. I have 2 kids, and speaking of beagles, I have a beagle too. He's a little beagle mix, but he's really cute, so he's probably gonna be running around upstairs. I've been writing for about 6 years now, but Lodestone is my debut novel that I'll be talking about some today. So yeah.
Yay, thank you so much. And so our next question, what was your journey to becoming a writer? And do you want to start again, Rosalyn?
Sure. Yeah, like I said, I've been writing for almost 4 years now, and I know that time frame because I didn't start writing until my youngest child was born. So after she was born, I went through postpartum depression and anxiety, and so I really needed an outlet for myself. I just needed something creative to do and something quiet because I had a 2-year-old and then the baby, and so I just needed something quiet to do while they were sleeping. And I had a really nice computer because I used to be a teacher. So I had this nice, computer, this MacBook, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna start writing a story. And so I did, and it was just amazing. I just kind of dove into the writing community. I watched, thousands of YouTube videos. I joined the writing community on Twitter and Instagram, and I don't know. I don't think I'd be able to turn back now. Definitely obsessed with writing now.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
I guess I'll go next. Yeah, I started writing when I was 13, very casually. And then in high school, I joined a writing club. I was too intimidated the first year when I was a freshman to go alone to a club, but I went the next year. And it ended up being really helpful to me. Like, that's where I built a lot of my confidence as a writer. I had fantastic teachers who were really encouraging and kind of helped me call myself a writer, because I used to say, this is my kind of sort of novel. And my teacher was like, no, it's a novel. You're writing it. It's a novel. You're a writer. And I was like, oh, okay. And then when I was in university, I kind of took a break. It was kind of just too much to balance writing with schoolwork. But I did still take creative writing courses, and I wrote basically like adult literary short fiction during that time. And then it was when I was out of school and 22 that I really dove into writing Twitter and the writing community, and got involved with other writers and kind of really stuck in. And that's kind of when I really went gung-ho with writing books and really actively pursuing publication and trying to be traditionally published and have my stories out in the world.
So my journey was actually a lot like Rosalyn's. My daughter was 2 and I was going through a rough time. And so I turned to writing as, like she said, a quiet activity, something that helped me focus. And so I started writing a novel right off the bat, and it was insanely long. It was like 254,000 words. And I was like, I'm gonna go and query this out. And I just kind of went for it. And of course, it was too long and I was inexperienced and lots of rejections happened. But I kept going. I started really researching the market and just practicing writing and growing as a writer. And so I started querying different novels that were more compact and more well plotted out and not just, my own inexperienced free writing. And eventually my book Lodestone got picked up by Gen Z Publishing in January of 2020. So it took about 5 years of practice before I felt ready enough. And it was during a Twitter pitch party that I got asked to query them. And so I did, and it turned out really well. So I have another novel coming out with them too next year. So I feel like I've gotten a jump start, and I'm excited to keep going.
That's awesome.
I love asking that question because it's so, I think, uplifting for those that watch that want to be writers or in the process of trying to get their book published, to see that there's so many different journeys and paths and timelines, and it's not the same for everyone. So, and I just love hearing that, and thank you so much for sharing. So our next question is, tell us about your books.
All right, well, I'll go first. I have 2 books published, and the first one was The Crown of Bones, which is kind of a mashup of every fairy tale or every Grimm's fairy tale, and it's kind of like a dark fantasy adventure that weaves together all the Grimm's fairy tales. And then my most recent one is A Sea of Pearls and Leaves, which is a retelling of the Grimm's fairy tale, The 3 Snake Leaves. And so what I wanted to do going into that book, well, first, I just love that fairy tale, and I know it's lesser known. Not many people know about that story. And so that's kind of why I wanted to do it. I wanted to have kind of this very original, this book and this idea. And so, yeah, I kind of worked around it. And yeah, so those are my 2 books out. I have a couple short stories published in anthologies. And the book that I'm currently working on, I'm hoping to query. So wish me luck when I get to that stage.
Great. Yeah, so my book, Blood Like Magic, is about a family of Black witches living in a near future Toronto, and 16-year-old Voya Thomas, who's given this task by her ancestor to either kill her first love or lose her family's magic forever. But she's never been in love. But lucky for her, this genetic matchmaking program hits the market, and she realizes that's her way to quickly find the person that's supposed to be her true love, just in time to kill him before the Caravana Festival, which is her deadline. But yeah, it's witchy. It is a mashup of fantasy and science fiction. And yeah, I enjoy it. It's definitely on the darker side, for sure.
So Lodestone's also on the darker side. It's dark fantasy, and I describe it as a haunted house story wrapped in magic, because it takes place in a haunted castle, and so there's a lot of those tropes going on that are in traditional haunted castle or haunted house stories. But it follows Melaine, who is a lodestone peddler, which means she can channel her raw biological magic into crystallized form called lodestones, and then she sells them on the street, and it's a very degrading sort of job. It's viewed that way. And so for a better life, she decides to she manages to gain an audience to the dark sorcerer ruler of the kingdom, and she wants to learn from him and power from him, but he's really weak. Something's wrong with him, and he needs her lodestones and exchanges them to teach her. So, like I said, haunted castle, magic, dark magic, blood magic, just explore some dark, morally gray characters, things like that.
Well, they all sound fabulous. And Rosalyn, you talked a little bit about this, but what inspired you all to write these particular stories, and what were the challenges in bringing them to life?
It's a great question. So yeah, about mine, I guess I didn't really dive into it, but A Sea of Pearls and Leaves is a retelling of the Three Snake Leaves. And in that story, there's an eccentric princess who won't marry anyone unless they agree that if she were to die first, they have to be buried beside her. So basically buried alive if she dies first, so that they won't live a day without their love. So the very first challenge was coming up with an eccentric enough character who would make this, make this sort of contract. And so I came up with Ingrid, who is the main character, and she is a princess. And then, so I needed her to be eccentric enough to do this, and then she needed a reason why. So then, kind of coming up, kind of following this fairy tale, but coming up with realistic reasons why someone would do this. And so that was kind of the first challenge. And then other than that, this book, yeah, it was just so fun to bring her to life. And then immediately her girlfriend, Lilura, as soon as I knew that, I was trying to come up with who her girlfriend would be, Lilura just kind of sprung to life in my mind, and she was just always there. And so yeah, she was much easier to come up with than Ingrid was. And so I think for me that was the hardest part of this story, was just coming up with a character who would be kind of wild enough to make someone die for them. So but yeah, other than that, it was very fun to write.
Love that. My inspiration for Blood Like Magic was I was, living away from Toronto and missing it a lot. And I really wanted to set a book there so I could kind of nostalgically feel connected to my hometown. And I had an idea floating around about a family of Black witches. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do this. And then I had an image of a girl in a bath of blood. And then, similar to Rosalyn, I had to figure out who is this character that would be doing this and why, and thinking about things from there. My big challenges, I think, were a lot of world building challenges because I didn't really do much planning before I went to write, which I now do much more of because of that. But I was inventing a lot of the magic rules on the fly. And so I then had to go back and like make everything make sense and make sure the rules were coherent and that I wasn't just breaking rules because it was convenient for the plot, that I was sticking to all of that, but also kind of making sure I understood what Voya as a main character wants in the story. And it was actually kind of later on in the process that I realized that I didn't think I had her internal motivation correct. And I had to change it and I had to adjust things. So really kind of making sure I understood my character inside and out was another challenge, versus like other characters I found came a lot more naturally, though I think it is also natural that you struggle a lot with your main character, who is the focus of the book, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, character development for me too is definitely up there on challenges. With Lodestone, like I said, there's a lot of morally gray character exploration going on. And so one of my inspirations was, what would it be like to follow the story of someone who chooses to serve the stereotypical Dark Lord sort of villain in a story, and what would their journey be like, and what would they struggle with? And so, but I wanted both the sort of Dark Lord trope to be turned on its head, and I wanted the main character to, of course, people want to root for her and not to be evil or anything. So it was finding this balance between good and evil, and what makes you root for somebody and what makes you hate somebody and all that. So I had to, striking the balance of that was challenging while writing it, but I think I got there in the end.
Okay, so you guys are like extra credit right now because you're answering some of the other questions, but I'm gonna ask them anyways if you can expand on them a little bit. So the next question is about, where did you start your story? So where did you start writing? What were the first ideas? Do you start with the characters? Do you start with like the plot or the actual world that they're existing in? So where do you start?
Yeah, I did touch on that a little bit because when it comes to a fairy tale retelling, you kind of have that nugget of an idea. I mean, fairy tales are very short. They often don't even give characters names. They're only like a couple pages long. So you kind of just have that nugget of an idea, kind of where the main plot would sit, and then kind of figure out from there what you're going to build around it. So there is a bit of plot, but then also fitting those characters and figuring out who they would be. But for me, once I kind of had a vague idea of that, one of the first things I did, and I've told this to other people, one of the very first things I did was actually a little bit of world building, because in the original fairy tale, the princess and her husband are buried in a crypt, which I think is a great visual. You know, that's great and that's very spooky, but I didn't want to copy it exactly. So I decided that they would be buried, that he would have to be buried alive on a boat grave. And so, you know, sent out to sea and just meant to drown alive, you know, and kind of go that way. And so I thought, I just had this vision of boat graves in my mind. So then I had to think of from there the world building around, all right, what type of society would be using boat graves? Where would they live? You know, what kind of mythology would they follow? And so it just really built from there. That single idea of boat graves really turned into this whole mass of world building from there.
Yeah. Similarly, I was building from one thing as well, from that image of the girl in the bath of blood. And then I kind of thought, okay, well, how does their magic work? And then it just felt natural, given that initial image, that it would be a sort of blood magic. And then I created kind of very simple rules for how I was going to proceed from there. which is basically if they wanted to cast spells, they would have to use blood. And the only time they could use magic and not use blood was if they used their gift. And every witch would have their own unique gift, which would range from like laughable to something really enviable and powerful. And then I really kind of just went from there. But I started from like a concept, that family of Black witches in a future Toronto, and that image, and then I really had to expand from there, from that character. And I had to think about things like, what is this character struggling with? And that also came out through the magic system of, you know, in order to get your powers and become a witch, you have to do this task. And the task is you have to make a decision. And so I thought, who is the worst character to be in that situation, and what would make that the most difficult for her? And so I created a character who is very, very bad with decisions, and in fact is like very much like poked and prodded by her family about not being good at doing that, and her decisions just get progressively more and more difficult, despite the fact that she was bad at it to begin with. So I feel like often my process, like once I've worked to the character, is thinking about what would make it most difficult for this character to succeed. Partially because I'm mean and I torture them, but partially because I just think it makes for a more interesting story.
Yeah, for Lodestone, I coming up with Melane's the job of her selling lodestones, like selling her raw magic on the streets, and how that would affect somebody, and why they would want a better life for that reason. That sort of thing is how I started Lodestone. And from there, it sprung pretty quickly into realizing, okay, I need to build an economy for this world. And so really the world building itself started from that, and needing to develop this city and the politics and the economy that would surround somebody who would have to be poor and in this situation where it's that's the only thing they can do is weaken themselves in order to make other people more powerful. So really, yeah, it started from that concept, and then the world building went out from there.
It's so interesting how it seems like all of you had like a very small part that you knew, okay, this is what's going to be the story, and then you just grew everything from that.
Yeah.
It's so much work.
It's fun
But
work.
it's all done in pretty, and people can buy it at Serious Galaxy Bookstore or check it out from your local library. So here is a new question. Was there a particular scene or moment in your book that surprised you? Like you didn't think it was going to happen, and then all of a sudden you were writing and it just evolved. Or you look back and you think, I didn't really know that it would end up like that. Just anything that surprised you.
You know, more than just a scene or like a moment for me, it was kind of a huge plot point that when I was first outlining was not supposed to happen. But then I thought this is the only way to have this like perfect ending for the book. And so basically, if anybody watching has read it, or I won't give away anything, but basically in the original outline of the story, the character Soren wasn't supposed to have as big of a role as he did, which I think would shock anybody who's read it because he's one of the main POV characters. So I think that shocked me, and that was very early on, you know, when I was outlining, but still it was kind of like this huge risk that I was going to take, like, you know, like making him a big character, and I think it worked out. He's kind of a crowd favorite. I get messages from people, they love him and they really relate to him because he's like this kind of, he's this quirky and anxious guy, and he's just kind of not your typical romantic hero. And I'd say people would be shocked to know that he wasn't always supposed to be a big character.
That's so fun. I love those characters that just like assert themselves without your permission.
It happens a lot.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that. For me, it was there's a scene towards the end that I won't really say because it's a big spoiler scene, but I had gotten some feedback from my agent that was kind of like, it seems like this character kind of gets off a little bit too easy. And I misinterpreted that, and I thought that she was saying I should kill them. And I was like, but I don't want to do that. And she was like, no, no, no. Oh my gosh, no, I actually think that would be terrible. I just think that how they're finishing here is a little bit too easy. They get off a little too scot-free. And so I was like, okay. And I fixed that. But then I thought, maybe I do want to kill someone. And so I hadn't had any plans for that originally. And then I kind of changed my mind because it made me think of like characters that are maybe having too easy of a time or getting off too scot-free. And I think sometimes it is tricky with things like that because you don't want to like be gratuitous and just be doing it for the sake of it and shock factor. You got to like do a lot of weaving in for things to make sense. But yeah, that was something that I had not planned because I'm usually very soft and I want to treat all my characters nice. But that's why I'd had that critique come up in the first place. So it was interesting because that's not at all what she was telling me to do, but.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I think one of the scenes that just kind of flowed out surprisingly, at least in the detail that it was, is the backstory of a certain character. And I don't want to give spoilers away, but it was, I could have just kind of glossed a little bit, but I went farther into it. And I'm glad I did because it helped inform that character a lot. But also later a reader asked for a prequel. They're like, I want a prequel for this character, you know, like write a whole book. So it was just nice to hear that a scene that surprised me ended up touching a reader so much that they want like a full book just about that character. It's nice to hear.
I'm just checking Facebook to see if we have any questions or any comments. We have Tiffany who says hello. Hello, Tiffany. Thank you for joining us. I can see like there's people watching, but no one else has made any comments. So please, if you have any questions for the authors, if you just want to say hi or share anything about what we're talking about, please feel free to add those to the comments and I'll give you a little shout out. So there's an incentive, get your shout out. Okay, so the next question is about magic and magical beings. So you've all touched a little bit about if there's magic, if it's just like a world where it's kind of understood, it's not really explicitly said. So what type of magical beings are in your world? And is magic a good thing? Are there any costs or benefits to being someone who has magic?
So in A Sea of Pearls and Leaves, there are humans who, it's very rare for humans to be able to control or possess magic. There's only a few sorcerers in the world. But then there are halflings who, before the events of the book have even started, back when, you know, in their history, they had been exiled and so they're not around, but there's all this mythology and folklore and all this information that the characters know about these halflings. So they would either be a harpy, a mermaid, or a centaur. And they, the halflings are, it's a lot easier for them to possess magic. And so my main character, Ingrid, really feels for these people. She doesn't understand why they were banished, and she keeps seeing these visions of a mermaid that looks a lot like her. This, like, she calls it her doppelganger, but it's very scary for her. She sees it in reflections. And so, like, and sometimes in her dreams and in reflections in, you know, in the bathtub, by the sea, she'll see it. And so, so anytime she's near something with a reflection, she gets scared, and she thinks it's an omen that she's gonna die. And so, so she's kind of scared, but then she's also wondering who this is. And also, one of the characters in the book does possess magic, Lilura. She is a sorceress, but she has to keep it hidden because there's a lot of reasons, but nobody was allowed, especially on Norella Isle where they are living at the time. Everybody with magic was banished, and you know, even though sorcery was very rare, even the last sorcerer had been banished, and so Lilura has to keep her powers hidden. And so Ingrid does know about her powers, but she doesn't know much else about how Lilura has these powers. And so it is a very fun thing to explore. And I'm currently working on another book that will be set in the same world, and it'll be about the mermaids. And so it's just exciting to kind of explore those all together and kind of dive deeper into their mythology and folklore around it.
Yeah. In my book, there's just witches. But yeah, they're also living secretly. They're in near future Toronto. So the average person is not a person that believes in witches or magic, but it's a precaution. It's something they've gotten used to doing, to keeping that to themselves. And there are even some things in their past that have kind of shown them that it's very good that they continue to keep that to themselves. And magic for Voya, there's lots of benefits to it. Like, she's grown up with that in her family. They've always been witches. They have a long history, and they have connection to their ancestors through their magic. So she has a connection to her history that otherwise would have been lost through colonialism. And she's able to connect in that way. And her family having magic is how they kind of work their jobs. It's how they make money. It's how they take care of each other. So that's the big bonus there. But then the sort of flip side of it is that same connection to her ancestors is why she's in this situation in the first place. It's how she gets this terrible task that she's trying to grapple with, while also kind of struggling with living up to the legacy of her ancestors and the powerful witches that they've always been, and trying to connect to that as, you know, her in her present state, kind of not thinking of herself as anything special, and in fact kind of thinking of herself as kind of a bit of a disappointment, magic wise. And then there's also an alternative flip side in that, you know, her family, the way they practice magic, they use their own blood to cast spells, but some other witches use other people's blood. They torture people to get power from their blood. They even sometimes kill people to get power from their blood. So there's also kind of two sides of how people are practicing magic, one of which can have, you know, it's definitely a con for the people that are being used in that way. So definitely those kind of two sides of the pros and cons of magic in that world.
It's really interesting. Yeah, so with Lodestone, it's mostly humans in the world, but there are some rumored creatures who live in the wilds, which is sort of a dense forest that people don't go into because very few come out. But humans are the main characters, and every human has magic. So it's in their bones, it's very biological, but only certain people are able to make lodestones, like the main character, Melaine, is able to do that. But the catch is, you know, people really, it's very hypocritical, because they want to buy her lodestones so that they can make their own magic stronger, but they also look down on her for weakening herself to do that. So it's, even though magic is accepted, and rampant, there are some, it's like I said, going back to the economy of the world and the politics and religion, it just kind of all revolves around magic. and the pros and cons of having individual talents within that magic, that kind of thing.
It's so interesting how each of you just did it so differently. Like magic can, like, it can be anything. And just the way that you kind of chose to have it be in your story is just so fascinating. And I love fantasy, and I love magic, and I love witches, and I love folklore and folk tales. And I just love how creative authors like you can be and having it in your stories. So thank you for sharing about that. Okay, we have a Facebook question from Tiffany. Thank you, Tiffany. Do you have any diverse book recommendations, or just any recommendations of books that are similar to yours? On the spot. If we can't come up with a list, Tiffany, I will come up with some. I do work, and I'll paste them into the comments too later. So, but do you know of any similar books or similar authors that are writing that you want to recommend?
Chime in out of order if that helps. I always recommend, like, one of my favorite reads of 2020 Legend Born by Tracy Dion. It's just fantastic. Like, she's got such a great magic system. It's built off of Arthurian legend, which, like, I'm a person that didn't even know that much about it, and like wouldn't have put that as my interest point, but she does it in such an interesting way. And it's set on a college. It is YA, but it's like a pre-college sort of program. And there's also a really big element of ancestral connection through magic. And in the case of the main character, Bree, she's kind of got two separate sort of connections in that way. Like, she's pulled into this secret society of the Legend Born, and they have their own history and they have their own ancestral connections, and she's kind of the outsider trying to figure out a mystery. And then she has her own separate connection with another sort of magic that's also existing in the world. So that's definitely something I would recommend, to be like kind of similar to Blood Like Magic in that way. Also, A Dark and Hollow Star by Ashley Shuttleworth. It's about 4 queer teens who are like living in like the human and the fae world. It's also set in Toronto, which is great. And it's just like got such great perspectives. It's such like expansive world building, because you have like the human world and the fae world, and it's also not just in Toronto, like they're different courts in different places. And you get the queer diversity with that as well. Those are my 2 big recommendations.
So I'm having a hard time thinking of, being on the spot. I'm bad about
I know, it's hard.
But the book I'm reading now, I just started it, so I can't give too much of it away, but it's not similar to my book at all. I'm going to say that right now, but it is a fairy tale retelling for adults, and so that's why I'm saying it right now. It's For the Wolf by Hannah Witton, that recently came out, and but yeah, since it's a fairy tale retelling for adults, it's not a YA, so I think it kind of those, it's for adults who loved reading fairy tale retellings growing up, and you can continue to read them as an adult. So that's my one recommendation, and it's very good. I'm not even halfway through it yet, but I love it so far.
One of my big influences is Uprooted by Naomi Novik. It's got sort of a similar, it's a high fantasy, that kind of intimate in a castle small setting for a good bit of the novel, a bit of that Beauty and the Beast sort of thing, which Lodestone also has. So it's just the magic and everything really inspired me with Uprooted. So I like to recommend that one to anyone who's a fantasy fan.
I'll have to read that one. I read Spinning Silver by her. And
yes, I haven't read that one yet, but I'm excited to. My to be read list.
Yeah, I was going to say Uprooted was one thing I just immediately thought of, but also last week we chatted with Rachel Griffin. Her YA book, The Nature of Witches, just came out, and it's all about witches whose power kind of goes with the different seasons. So it's very like earthy and witchy and very fun. So that's one. And I'm gonna have to think of some more and then share those.
Yeah. And that book is beautiful. Nature of Witches, like the cover, and like there's like art for all the different seasons.
There's a lot of like witchy, fun books that are coming out. It makes me so excited. Like I love all the magic and the witchiness and the fantasy. It's just fantastic. So thank you, Tiffany, for that question. It challenged us, which is good. We need to be challenged. So you all answered this already, but it's just about if your books are just going to be standalones. Are you going to be writing more in that world? Are you not going to write in that world anymore? And just because you already mentioned it a little bit, why, if you are going to continue writing in that world, why are you going to continue?
All right, that's a good question. I am going to keep writing in the world of A Sea of Pearls and Leaves, but it won't be a sequel. It'll just be kind of in the same world. There might be some Easter eggs that you might hear a name or drop or two from the book, but it won't be connected to it. But the book I'm working on, it's a Little Mermaid retelling, but yeah, so I'm excited to work on that. And yeah, and it's kind of a twist on the Little Mermaid. It's a lesbian romance, and so it'll be I don't know, I think it'll be fun, and there's an underwater circus, and yeah, so I'm working on that. And I think I just really wanted to explore more in that same world. I did so much world building and mythology for it, and I had, there were mermaids in it. Well, not really in it, but there was talk about mermaids, and I actually had a few people ask or even mention, say like in a review or something, where they're like, they wanted to know more about these other halflings because they only got to see one in the entire book. So I think this will be kind of, I need to explore more of those stories now.
Ooh, how exciting.
Love The Little Mermaid. Always. Yeah, so Blood Like Magic will have a sequel that'll come out next year. So set in the same world, following the same characters, which I'm really excited to say. Some people have asked if it's a standalone after they've read it, and I've been like, oh gosh, no. It's like the same thing. I did so much work. I need to like get some more out of that. But yeah, I'm really excited about that. It's a duology, so that'll be the series ender. But I think it's a very good end. I'm working on it now. And I would be interested in doing spin-offs in the same world. I don't think I would tell the same character story. I kind of feel like this second book is going to tie it together really well. But I really love that future Toronto setting, and I love how the witches are set up. I would definitely love to dabble elsewhere in the world, but we'll see if that comes to fruition.
Yeah, I really enjoyed my world building too. It was so fun to do, just the process of that. Lodestone is standalone, but there's room for more in that world, and I've had some people request it, and I would love to jump back in. So I don't have anything in the works right now. My book next year that's coming out is completely unrelated, but I've thought about it. I might dip my toes back into the Lodestone world, have something in the future.
Fingers crossed. So our next question is, have you always been drawn to the fantasy genre? And are there any other genres you would like to write in? I know, Liselle, you said that your book's kind of a mix of like science fiction and fantasy, but is that kind of where you all are sitting? Like you sit in the fantasy chair and you're comfortable there and you like it, or do you like to sit in other chairs?
For me, I don't know, right now, like the novels that I have planned out are all fantasy, but whenever I write short stories, they're gothic romance. So like, you know, classic Victorian settings. I've had 2 of those published. And so I find it like funny that I usually stick to that for my short stories. So I'm like wondering if I will ever expand on an idea. One of my short stories I'm still like obsessed with, and so I'm wondering if I should expand that into a novel. But other than that, the only other genre I could imagine myself one day, maybe when I feel really confident, is possibly writing a mystery, because in A Sea of Pearls and Leaves, there's a slight mystery that's going on, like a subplot. And so I just really enjoy that. And I've always enjoyed reading mystery novels. And so maybe someday, but for now, like the next few novels I've planned out are all fantasy.
Yeah. Growing up, I like read a ton of fantasy. That's like, and I still read a lot of fantasy now, and sci-fi as well. But I've also always like had a big love of horror movies and like the sort of like mashup of horror and thriller. And my like 2023 and 2024 books will be a lot more in that vein. I can't help but blend genres, so they usually end up being more than one. Butcher Birds, which will come out in 2023, is really like a psychological suspense horror thriller type thing. So I do like kind of getting to dabble in both. Yeah, and I wrote fantasy for so long, even though I also like watched so much horror, and I've always been such a horror fan, but I think I was a little bit intimidated to do it in a book format, because I wasn't actually consuming a lot of horror books. But I just kind of took the leap and tried it, and it ended up working out well. But yeah, those are the genres that I really like and like stick to: fantasy and sci-fi, and that like horror thriller mashup. I don't think I could do a straight thriller. I find it really difficult to do things that aren't going to have something supernatural in them. So I always have to do it with some other elements so that I can be like, and now there's a witch, or now there's a vampire or a ghost or something. I have to put something in.
Yeah, I'm the same way when it comes to putting in supernatural elements into other genres, because I love history and historical fiction. And my next book that's coming out, The Hand-Me-Down Maiden, it's set in the 1920s, and it's low fantasy or magical realism in a way, but it's set in the historical time period. And I love writing in historical time periods and researching and all the stuff that goes with that. I just love, but I don't know if I could write a straight historical fiction with no magic or no supernatural stuff at all, just because for me it takes some of the fun out of it. But maybe I would one day. I also love horror. I've written a short story in an anthology that's a ghost story, and Lodestone has a lot of horror elements with monsters and ghosts and things like that. So, and then science fiction, I've written a couple of science fiction novels that I'm hoping will get published. And I don't know, I love anything speculative. It's fun. But I'll stick with fantasy too. Like, fantasy's great. I love it.
Well, fantasy and paranormal is so great because you can do so much with it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're not tied down to whether or not something's possible, because it can be possible in your book.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just fantastic. So you've mentioned before a little bit about your writing process, kind of how you plotted or didn't plot, how you wrote. But what about like the environment? Can you write from anywhere? Do you have to be at your desk with the door closed, no sound, or do you have music that you listen to? Can you write when people are near you, like in a coffee shop, or do you have to be away from everyone? So what's kind of your writing process in those terms?
I would say a majority of the time I have to wake up early before my kids are up, because usually once they're up, then game's over. So I wake up at 5 a.m. every day, and I take my laptop and my coffee. I leave my phone upstairs. I can't have my phone around if I'm trying to write. And I will write for an hour to an hour and a half every morning. And then if I get time later, that's great. But at least I've had my me time, my writing time in the morning. That being said, that's been since like the pandemic. And, it used to be where they were going to like a pre-K a couple days a week. And so I could write anywhere. I could go to a coffee shop. I could go, to a restaurant. I could just come home and sit anywhere in the house, really. But yeah, since things are going better now, but it's summer, so they're home. And we did e-learning this year. So I was helping my daughter with her e-learning. So pretty much that 5 a.m. writing time, that was it. And so, but yeah, that's kind of my writing routine. I mostly just sit on the couch in the basement very early in the morning. And I think my brain, I'm still too tired to really do anything else. So I can just like focus just on that one story and just like, type out a bunch of words. And yeah, that's been my process. I'm hoping possibly when they go to school, maybe I'll be able to change it up a little bit. But for now, that's been it.
I'm definitely the shut in room, complete silence, don't do anything else, can't listen to music, can't do other things, have to sit and focus completely. Things kind of differ depending on what stage I'm in though sometimes. Like if I'm doing plotting or planning, then I'm a lot more flexible because I kind of sometimes have to get inspired. Sometimes I do have to stop and I have to put on a song so that I can get the mood and the ambiance of what I'm trying to put together. And then I have to stop the song in order to do the work. And if I'm drafting, then I'm incredibly strict. It's complete silence. I put on a sprint timer. I do my 20-minute sprints and I focus very intensely. I didn't always have an office. So when I didn't have an office, I was writing on my bed or I was writing on the couch, wherever, but it was still like the same environment. I had to have complete silence. And however I was able to get that was how I was able to get that. So when I was working full time, I was also waking up early in the morning to get it done. When I was living with my family, I was also doing that just so I could be awake when the rest of them were not awake and moving around and making sounds. So I do like go with people when they like are like, let's go to a coffee shop and write together, but you never write, you just chat. Like so little gets done. So if I go and do that, it's like a bonus. So I'll like earlier in the day, I'll do all the writing that I have to do that day so that I don't have to do anything when I go to do the like buddy writing. And that way, if I get nothing done and I just chat, then it's totally okay. But yeah, I definitely need like perfect silence and isolation.
I'm definitely an isolation writer too. It's been difficult with COVID and everything this year because my kids did e-learning too, and especially the 8-year-old was very much wanting to come into my bedroom where I work and my desk and everything. She wanted to come in all the time, and there were some times where she had questions with homework, but luckily she's very independent and has been able to do a lot on her own, and her teacher's been fantastic with keeping them occupied, So ideally, and what I would normally do is to wake up around 7:30 or 8 and just sit at my desk and write until 3 or 4 if I can, just all day until kids come back from school. And that has been difficult this past year, but it's going to be fine. It's going to get better. And I'll just go back to that routine. I think since getting published, marketing has started eating into my writing time, which is fine. It's great. I actually really enjoy a lot of the marketing stuff. I'll create like ads with Photoshop and just like all this stuff that I like to do on the side. But lately I've been needing to start getting back to writing again. So having that discipline to sit down in my chair and like, okay, it's time to write now. I'm having to reteach myself that a little bit.
And what was the most rewarding part of the writing process? I know it's like, okay, I'm done, but is there any part that you just enjoy more than the others?
Well, I think this will probably be this is a common, I guess, answer that I'm sure a lot of authors feel. But when you actually hold your book in your hands, when you get your proof copy that first time, it's, I was just crying. It is amazing, and it's so rewarding to have all those words in your hands. I guess the only other thing that feels so rewarding is just when you get a great review and you're just blown away by how much someone loved your book. I think that's so rewarding when it really clicks with the right person, and you just feel so grateful. You're like, oh my gosh, I put in like a year of work or more on this book, and they, even though they can read it in like a day, it's amazing when someone loves it. And so yeah, I'd say that's up there, but definitely the moment of holding it in your hands, that's just the most rewarding thing to me.
Yeah, that's super rewarding, like hearing that positive feedback for your book that you worked on for so long. For me, a big thing is I'm unnecessarily obsessed with having twists in my book, for no real reason, because it's not a requirement of fantasy, but this is how my brain works. And so for me, when I like think of a twist and then I think of the way that I'm going to follow it through and I do it and it works, and someone, like a reader or my editor or my agent reads it and they're like, oh my gosh, this thing that happened here, like that, to me, that's so rewarding, because I'm so obsessive about having them in there and really wanting to get that reaction of like surprise and like people putting together all the breadcrumbs that I like sprinkled so meticulously to help them get to that point. I really, really love that.
Yeah, for me, I really enjoy like when I kind of with you with the breadcrumbs and twists and all that with plotting, I look at a lot of my work as puzzles, like you're putting puzzles together when it comes to plot stuff. And especially when I'm writing like the historical stuff, which I pull in a lot of research, I love having those historical facts click into place with the speculative stuff I'm writing. And it just, when something works out perfectly, it blends the two, it makes me really happy. And so I think that feeling of solving that puzzle is really rewarding for me. Just makes me feel smart.
Those are so fun. I love in historicals, like at the end where the author is like, this is all the stuff that was real. And you're like, oh my gosh, that was real.
Yeah.
Was there anything about getting your book published that surprised you, that you didn't expect would happen?
I know I kind of had looked over the questions, and that was one that I wasn't sure about. I guess that like anything that surprised me. I guess
Like how much time it took, how much
Yeah.
involved you were or weren't in certain parts.
Yeah, I think one of the maybe a surprising thing, that if someone's just writing and they haven't looked into which path they want to take first of all, and also how they want to go about it. Either way, you're going to have to work with an editor, and I think a lot of writers don't foresee how that relationship will work. And I loved my editor, and so but yeah, it was just, I think I learned a lot from them. And also it's really this like back and forth kind of relationship, depending on what type of edits you're doing, from developmental to all the way down to proofreading. I think that was the first thing that surprised me, because I had when I was just writing and focusing on that, I didn't foresee, the path to publishing, like you're going to have to do not only you have to do your own edits on the book and use beta readers and maybe get a critique partner, but you're going to work with a professional editor. And that's just kind of it is an awesome experience, but I think that's something that I would not have known about until I did it. And so, but yeah, I think it's a great experience. And but yeah, no matter what path you're going, you're going to need an editor. And I think it's a really great process, and it's good to be open to suggestions. And so I think that's always a big piece of advice, just to be open and like work with them. It's kind of like a partnership almost.
Mhm. Yeah, for me, it was really like the support that people gave the book. And like, I asked people, I'm like, definitely buy the book and like post a picture. And then it was like weirdly surprising to me when people bought the book and posted pictures. And when my family members like would buy the book, and like my partner's family and like his coworkers and friends of his friends bought copies of the book and were like, oh my gosh, I'm reading the book. Like, it's the thing that I wanted, but then I was weirdly surprised when it happened. I was like, oh yeah, I guess like people will actually purchase and read the book and like post pictures, like and just like the amount of joy I got from that support, and like how wonderful that made the experience. Just to have that, like that was a thing that like maybe shouldn't have been surprising, but was somehow surprising. But I think like in the publishing process itself, something that was surprising to me was realizing just how much you could get when you ask. I think going into traditional publishing, there was a lot where people kind of talked about like, you're going to have to do a lot of stuff and all this and this and that. And there are things I just imagined my publisher just kind of wouldn't do for me. And then I kindly had a wonderful, more established author that was like, ask for everything you want, and at worst you will be told no. And so I asked for everything I wanted. My publisher actually did quite a few things for me, things that I didn't expect it would do for me. And so I was surprised by like how much I could get out of the experience just by prompting and being like, hey, this is a thing that I want, could you do that for me? And of course you don't get everything. Some things I wouldn't have asked for. Sure, I'd love a billboard in Times Square, but I'm not going to ask for that. But yeah, it was very worth it, because I definitely was told yes a lot more than I was told no. And I think, yeah, it was a really big shift for me, because I had heard very much the opposite going into the experience. So it was nice and surprising and great to get that much support from my publisher, for sure.
I was going to talk about, very similar to what Rosalyn said about the editing process being really, what I loved was the collaboration throughout the whole process of editing and everything else that went into making the book, cover design, all that stuff, that I didn't lose creative control, which is something a lot of people often fear when they're approaching a publisher about a book. And I didn't feel that way at all. There were definitely suggestions that were given to me. And even if at first it's like, oh, this is my baby, this is my book, then it was easier for me than I thought to overcome that, and to realize this is actually a really good idea that they had, and let's work together and collaborate. And so I found myself really looking forward to the next round of edits. Whenever they would happen, I would open it up, and I always thought I would cringe a little, to hear any criticisms, but I was surprised to find that I actually was really open and enjoyed it very much to read those, and optimistic that it would make the book even better with every round that would go through.
So much collaboration. Like, I think people talk about writing as being very solitary, and maybe writing can be solitary, but like the process of publishing is very, very collaborative, I find.
And just because we were talking about editing, I'm curious, did a lot of words get cut during the editing process? Because I know we've had other authors onto the chat series where it's like thousands and thousands and thousands of words. And when you have a whole book, I'm sure it doesn't seem that much when you just say, oh, just a couple thousand, but like to readers, it's like we can't even imagine like writing a book, let alone like getting rid of part of it. So was there a lot of Was there a lot of editing in terms of like the length or not?
So for me, I actually, I'm getting better, but I'm definitely an underwriter. And so actually, no, I never really had to cut anything, luckily. But no, I haven't had to cut anything out. There's like just scenes or ideas that would need to be expanded upon. And so, so basically, it would just be the opposite, you know, where either I found out in the beta process or with the developmental edit that, oh, I should really expand this idea here and add more words. But so no, I've been lucky to not need to like cut a bunch of stuff out because I tend to have a pretty rigid outline, and then I kind of, you know, I'm an underwriter, so I don't tend to just write too much.
I wish it was an underwriter. Desperately wish. So before Blood Like Magic was bought, I had rewritten half of it twice. So 2 times I cut half of the book and then rewritten it. But once I was with the publisher, everything was adding and expanding. And this book, when I first wrote it, it was 60,000 words. The published book is 146,000 words. So it grew quite a bit because every time I needed to expand it, I expanded a lot. In some cases, I thought of new twists, those twists I'm obsessed with. And so then things had to be even longer for me to breadcrumb getting there. Yeah, so always gets larger. I try really hard these days to underwrite in order to avoid that, but I am like a chronic overwriter, and so things become very large before I know it. It's extremely easy for me to add 10,000 words and not even know how it happened.
Yeah, so I had mentioned earlier that the first novel I ever attempted to write was 254,000 words, which is, it's long. So since then, and realizing, okay, like especially a debut novelist, they're not gonna publish a book that long, and plus that book just needed a lot of work anyway. But I learned from that experience and thought, okay, I need to outline, I need to have a word count, general word count in mind for how long this book is going to be. And that's been my approach since then. And so I've stuck pretty close to not overwriting or underwriting. Lodestone got a little bit longer than it had when I first submitted it, but not by a lot. But I tend to try to underwrite, to err on the side of underwriting, because things usually do get expanded as they go along. But I've rewritten things, so things will get cut, but I'll fill it back in with something better. But that doesn't change the length a whole bunch. It's usually what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you hope readers take away from your book?
All right. Well, for in a sea of pearls and leaves, I don't know. I really hope that people can take away that there are, that there are just different forms of love, and that, yeah, every heart is a little different, and yeah, that's a big takeaway. I really wanted to write like this, a fantasy book, but with these characters that have different orientations, and just, yeah, to show that different, yeah, like I said, yeah, every heart works a little differently, and that's a big deal too. The character Lilura, she has a special heart, like literally and magically has a special heart. So she kind of learns how to navigate that, and all the while her girlfriend Ingrid is in the middle of this. Basically, I didn't mention that there's a bunch of suitors on the island vying for her hand, so she's dealing with, the jealousy over that, and so it's just, yeah, I think the biggest takeaway is just that every heart's a little different, and I hope that people can enjoy the romance of this book because it's very special.
For me, I really hope that readers feel represented in some way, seen in some way, whether that's through, reading about someone that looks like them, or representation through the LGBTQIA plus community, or whether that's connecting to the main character who is struggling with deciding what she wants to do with her future when she really has no idea, and she's got a lot of external pressures on her to make those decisions. So yeah, I think that's definitely something that I hope that people come away from the book feeling like they saw themselves somehow in like the character or character struggles, for sure.
I hope with Lodestone that people feel Melaine is a very driven character. She knows what she wants and she goes and gets it. And I think that can be inspiring, but also with her journey, she learns when is important to rein it in, when is important to be selfless as opposed to selfish, and what really matters most is to be empathetic with people, and that sort of thing. So I hope it gives some readers something to think about along those lines, but also just that I hope they had a chance to escape, and if they needed it, or just to have fun and dive into a world that's completely different from this one, and just to I hope that it lingers with them, that it sticks with them as much as they would want it to, so that they can just have something from it that's longer than just reading those pages. I hope it sticks with them.
Thank you. So we are getting to the last few minutes. So I'm going to ask our last question and our closing question. So this is the question that we ask at every single one of these chats, and we love to hear the author's answers, but don't feel pressured if you can't think of one or if you think of too many. Perfectly fine. What is your favorite library memory?
All right, well, that's a really cute question, first of all. I would say, I guess as a child, going to school, it was just always special. Like, it was always one of my favorite days when we could go to the library and, check out a different book each week. And that was just always special. We'd just get to browse, and that was just always one of my favorite parts of the week. But I'd say even as an adult, one of my favorite things was, so when I was a teacher, I was a Latin teacher. And so along with my colleague and a couple of our students, we actually, and this is funny that I even did this because looking back, I'm like, okay, so I can see where my journey sort of began. So we actually wrote a children's book about a little Roman girl who spoke Latin. And we wrote this book. I illustrated it, and we actually had this huge event at the local library where we had children come. We had this big, like a day-long event for them, where we did activities. They learned about Rome and about Latin and mythology, and we gave every kid one of the books. And so it was just, I don't know, that was just a very special day to me. We had like a big cake with the cover on it and everything. And so it was just so special to kind of get kids into excited about Latin, because it's hard to do. And so that was probably one of my favorite library moments.
So fun.
That is so cute.
Yeah, when I was in middle school, I was one of the library helpers. Me and all of my friends honestly were the library helpers. So then there were so many times where we just were hanging out in the library during recess, because we were indoor type kids, and getting to see the first books that come out and talking with the librarian about all the different books. And then of course, the coveted Scholastic Book Fair is always such an exciting time. I feel now as an adult, I feel so much sympathy for my mom, where I would bring her the catalog and I'd be like, okay, I want this book set, this book set. And she would have to tell me, okay, one thing. So I have so many different of those memories, but like something that stands out from later on, in high school, they took us to the Toronto Reference Library, which I had never been to before, but it's gigantic. It has 4 floors, it has an elevator, and just like walking in there for the first time, my mind was completely blown just by the hugeness of it, because my local library, my school library, were very, very small. So to go to a place that was 4 floors of books was just amazing.
So my memory also has to do with a big library. I went to 2 different elementary schools and they were both on the smaller side, but I always loved to read. And when I went to middle school, I was going to be going to one of the biggest middle schools in the country. So the school was huge, and it was basically 5 sections, like 5 schools kind of combined into one. It was that huge. And I was really intimidated because I've always been socially anxious a lot. And so I was really intimidated to be around so many people on a daily basis. But when I first walked into the school library at this middle school, it was huge, and I was just so thrilled to see. And it wasn't 4 floors, but it was 2, and it was this big room, and just like my 6th grade eyeballs were just so wide by this whole library. And throughout middle school, I was bullied a good bit. And so that library became my refuge, and I just loved it so much that I have really fond memories of that library. And I read practically every book, like for each grade level as it went on. It was good times. I still have fond memories of that library.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing. I love hearing everyone's memories. It's just so heartwarming. It's like we all have memories of libraries. So happy. Okay, we are a little bit over. You've all kind of talked about what's next for you, but just a refresher for those that are watching now and watching later when this is recorded. What is next for you?
Right. Well, for me, I have a couple books in the works. So one book that is finished, well, I have revisions to do first, so it'll still be a while, but it's the book that I actually plan to query, and it's currently titled Her Dark Enchantments, and it's actually a Maleficent origin story. And so yeah, I'm really obsessed with it right now. Like when you first finish a book, it's like always, right there in your mind. But so I have revisions to do, but my plan for that book is to query it. And then another book that I'm starting to work on, because it's going to be in a box set in fall of 2022, is the Mermaid one that's set in the same world as A Sea of Pearls and Leaves. So that is actually going to be in a box set. So I will be publishing that one myself but also it's like kind of under contract with the whole set. But yeah, so that'll be an interesting, I've being self-published, I've always just had my own timelines, and I think I write books pretty fast, so I'm not too worried about it. Like I know I'll be fine, but yeah, just the fact that it has to be done by a certain time is a little intimidating, but that's what I'm working on. So I've got a Little Mermaid retelling and a Maleficent origin story that are in the works.
Wonderful.
Fabulous.
So next year in 2022, the sequel to Blood Like Magic will be coming out, and that will be the end of that series, which is a duology. And in 2023, I'll have Butcherbirds coming out. That's a standalone suspense horror thriller book. It's about a girl and her single mother who inherit a mysterious mansion in Northern Ontario that houses quite a few of its own secrets. And then with one more book to follow in 2024, but that one's still in the works.
I have, I mentioned my next book is called The Hand-Me-Down Maiden, and it's a 1920s fairy tale historical fantasy book, and it comes out in 2022. So that'll be my next one that I'm really excited about. And it's because it's very different from Lodestone. It's, you know, Lodestone's dark fantasy and Hand-Me-Down Maiden is light, very light, fluffy romance sort of fantasy. So I like having the two opposites. It's very fun for me. I'm also working on a paranormal historical fantasy sort of thing right now that I'm also really excited about. I'm going darker again, but more into the realm of vampires and fae and that sort of thing this time.
They all sound amazing. I'm so looking forward to it. I know that everyone watching now and later is also looking forward to it. So we're going to have to keep an eye on you and make sure that when things get published and things are available, we can grab them. Thank you so much for joining me for this chat, for talking about all of your experiences and your journey to becoming a writer and just all of your books. Thank you for spending more time than we originally thought. Very appreciative. Thank you to all of our viewers for watching, those that watched with us live, and Tiffany, those that are watching this later on. If you are interested in more free online programming like this, check out our Facebook events, check out our website, see what we have planned. Our next chat will be next week on Wednesday, June 30th at 5 p.m. And it's going to be a panel on Jewish history and romance. So thank you for joining us. We hope to see you next time. If you have a chance, please fill out our very short, very easy 3-question virtual program survey. Let us know if you enjoyed this event and if you want to see more like this. So thank you so much. And thank you again to the authors, Rosalyn, Liselle, and Katherine. Thank you so much. And we hope to see you all again.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. It was very nice to meet you all too.
It was.